All right, let's talk about economics. Yeah, I know, but stick with me. We're going to tackle the hidden rules that pretty much run your entire life, from your morning coffee to your career path. And we're going to do it all in about 5 minutes, so buckle up.
It really all boils down to one simple question. A question you've probably asked yourself while, scrolling through Instagram looking at fancy cars or amazing vacation spots. Why can't I have everything I want? I mean, you've got needs, right? Food, a roof over your head. But you've also got wants, like maybe a TV that's just a little bit bigger than your cousin's. And that feeling, that's it. That's the starting line for all of economics.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll hit the core problem, the thing that affects every single one of us. Then we'll look at the engine we built to try and solve it. After that, we're going to zoom way out to see how we grade the whole system, check out who's pulling the levers behind the curtain, and then we'll zoom right back into our own heads to see why we're all kind of bad with money.
Okay, Section 1, the core problem. It all begins with a simple, kind of frustrating fact of life that you just can't get around. And that fact is scarcity. It's the idea that we have these endless, unlimited wants, but we live on a planet with limited stuff. There just aren't enough resources, or hours in the day, or giant TVs to go around for everybody. If pizza was infinite, economics wouldn't even be a thing, but it's not. So we are forced constantly to make choices. And here's the kicker. Every single choice you make has a hidden price tag. It's called opportunity cost, and it's basically the value of the next best thing you didn't do. So the fact that you're watching this right now, it means you're not watching cat videos. That's your opportunity cost. And hey, I really hope we're worth it. So, how do we get more stuff if everything is scarce? Well, we get smart. We specialize and we trade. And the magic ingredient here is something called comparative advantage. It's not about who's the absolute best at making something. It's about who gives up the least to make it. Look at Brazil and Canada here. For Brazil to make coffee, they only have to give up a little bit of corn. But for Canada, it costs them a whole lot more corn. So it just makes sense, right? Brazil goes all in on coffee, Canada focuses on corn, they trade, and poof, both countries end up with more stuff than if they tried to do it all themselves. Everybody wins.
And that whole idea of trading naturally leads us to Section 2, the engine of exchange. See, if scarcity is the problem, then markets are our big collective shot at a solution. They're the whole system we invented to get the stuff we want from other people.
In the engine of any market, it runs on these two giant pistons, supply and demand. Supply is just how much of something is out there. Demand is how much people want it. And where those two things meet, that's what sets the price. It's this constant dance, Lower prices make more people want to buy, but higher prices make sellers want to produce more.
This whole process is what the famous economist Adam Smith called the invisible hand. And I think this quote just nails it. It's not some kind of magic. It's millions of people's individual choices, all driven by desire, a bit of math, maybe even some desperation, all working together in silence, coordinated only by prices. Nobody is in charge, but it just works.
Of course, this whole dance would be super clumsy if we were still trying to, trade goats for Wi-Fi. And that's where money comes in. You can think of it as economic lube. It just makes everything run smoother. It does three key things. It's a medium of exchange we all agree on, it's a unit of account so we know what things are worth, and it's a store of value so you can save up for that bigger TV. Okay, so let's zoom out. We've talked about individual choices and markets, but what about the big picture? That brings us to Section 3, the economy's report card. How do we even know if an entire country's economy is healthy or not? We've got to have a way to measure the whole system. And the most common measurement you'll hear about is gross domestic product, or GDP. Now, I know this formula looks a little intimidating at first glance, but I promise, it's actually super simple once you see what all those letters stand for.
C, way simpler than it looks. C is for consumption. That's just you and me buying stuff. I is for investment. Think businesses buying new machines and building factories. G is for government, all the money they spend on things like roads and schools. And that last part, X minus M, that's just net exports, the stuff we sell to other countries minus the stuff we buy from them. Add it all together, and you've got GDP. It's the total value of everything a country makes in a year. That's it.
But, and this is a big but, GDP is not a perfect report card. Not even close. It has some massive blind spots. I mean, it doesn't count unpaid work, like taking care of a relative. It completely ignores damage to the environment. And it definitely doesn't measure how happy we are. This slide puts it perfectly. It's like a microwave with no door. Yeah, it's still a tool, but it's seriously flawed.
So if the economy is this huge, complicated machine, you got to wonder, who's driving this thing? Well, Section 4 is all about who has their hands on the wheel, pulling the big levers to try and steer the whole economy.
Okay, so there are basically two main toolkits for trying to manage an economy. On one side, you have monetary policy. This is run by central banks like the Fed in the US. Their main tools are interest rates and the money supply. They make it cheaper or more expensive to borrow money to either cool things down or speed things up. Then on the other side, you've got fiscal policy. This is the government itself. They use their power to tax and to spend, cutting taxes to give people more cash, or spending on big projects to create jobs.
And one of the biggest results of all that fiscal policy is this number. When a government spends more money than it takes in from taxes in a year, that's called a deficit. The national debt is just what you get when you add up all of those deficits, year after year after year. It's the grand total of all the borrowing.
All right, for our final section, we're going to zoom all the way back in. Because all those neat, clean theories about markets and policy, they all slam into one messy, unpredictable problem: the human brain. This is the ghost in the machine.
And this brings us to the field of behavioral economics. The whole reason it exists is because it turns out we're not the perfectly rational, calculating robots that a lot of the old economic models just assumed we were. We're emotional, we're biased, and let's be honest, we often make choices that are not in our own best interest.
And our irrational brains have these predictable little glitches. Look at these. You've got loss aversion. That feeling where losing $20 hurts way more than the joy of finding $20 feels good. Or the sunk cost fallacy. That's when you force yourself to sit through a terrible movie just because you already paid for the ticket. We're just wired to prefer a tiny reward right now over a much bigger one later on. These aren't just little quirks. They have a massive, massive impact on the economy as a whole.
And that brings us to the end of our whirlwind tour. From the basic fact of scarcity, all the way to the weird wiring of our own brains, it's pretty clear there's no single perfect answer here. Every economic system out there, capitalism, socialism, anything in between, is really just a different set of trade-offs. So the ultimate question in economics isn't really what's right, it's which trade-offs are you, and are we as a society, willing to live with?